10 spine-chilling Dogman encounters, exposed tales of haunted attacks and unexplained creatures. It started with the howls piercing the stillness of the night in Pinewood Hollow. The air was heavy with tension, wrapping around Sarah like a vice. Hadn't this neighborhood always felt safe? And yet, here she was, an exhausted mother trying to soothe her children to sleep, with distant howls gnawing at her sanity. The calm, cookie-cutter home suddenly loomed as chilling silhouettes, shadows flitting across lawns like specters. What was that lurking in the woods? The echoes of tales about the Dogman swept through her mind, igniting a primal fear. It was a strange feeling, dismissing it all as fatigue. Maybe it was just the long hours at the hospital, the demands of being a nurse, and single mother weighing too heavily on her shoulders. Each night, after tucking her kids in, she'd sink into the couch, praying for a moment as peace. But the whispers grew louder. First, small things slipped through the cracks. Her 5-year-old daughter shuddering at shadows, eyes wide with terror as she murmured about a tall man outside their window. Her son's laughter faded into frantic cries, claiming a monster prowled at night. Every electric hair on her body stood on edge. Could it simply be nightmares? Or something more sinister? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The following nights escalated the tension. The howls grew closer and deeper, thrumming through her chest, echoing off the walls, the odd blend of a wolf's bay and something distinctly human. Eerie whispers clouded the air, suspicions mounting among neighbors, who had once gathered for barbecues and block parties. Now they wore tight lips and anxious glances, avoiding her questions as if she were mad. When did Pinewood Hollow, the picturesque place she called home, become a breeding ground for fear? Driven by instinct, Sarah prowled through the town's past, finding chilling tales buried deep in archives. The abandoned school, they said, had seen the disappearance of several children back in the 80s. Reports drowned out by time and silence. Her heart raced. What hurt had the town buried? And why were the police so dismissive? Maybe it was her tired eyes, or the sleep-deprived mind that twisted hopes into frantic shadows. Then one night, as she peered out her back window, the world felt too quiet. A chilling air swept through her. A primal instinct prickled her skin. There it was, eyes glowing from the darkness among the trees. Heart pounding, breath stuck in her throat, she could hardly believe what she saw. There, lurching through the shadows, was the embodiment of every nightmare whispered through the years. The Dogman, waiting, watching, hungry. This was no mere folklore. Its existence was entwined with hers, rooted in her family's tragic history. She felt a shudder of realization ripple through her. The monster wasn't just in the woods. It was part of Pinewood Hollow, lurking in homes, in hearts, and perhaps in her own children. With dread washing over her, Sarah stood motionless, grasping for answers as the howls rose around her. A monstrous truth loomed, a curtain pulled too late, and she had to decide: confront the horror or fall victim to it. The air felt dense and electric, charged with fear as Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. The Dogman's gaze fixed upon her like an anchor in the storm of her thoughts. What did it want? Fear twisted her stomach into knots as she slowly pulled away from the window, breath shallow and quick. She stumbled back, every instinct urging her to hide. But there was no safety in running. Her children stirred in their room, the sound of their soft, confused murmurs shattering the silence. The howls grew louder, echoing in the hollow darkness, entering the house like thick smoke. It gripped her, clawing at her resolve. Sarah's throat tightened as she thought of her daughter's innocent words. The tall man outside. Had her child seen this creature? A sudden scratch at the back door sent cold jolts through her. She froze, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. The fear was tangible, coiling around her heart. Straining to hear, she silenced the chaos of racing thoughts. The scratching persisted, slow, deliberate. It wasn't just a scrape, it was a calling. Her mind raced. Was the Dogman inside now, too? With trembling hands, she forced herself toward the source of the sound. The short hallway felt like a mile, the shadows swallowing her as she edged closer to the door. Her family's cries had changed. They were frantic, clawing for light and comfort. "Mom!" Her son's voice pierced the haze, rising with palpable terror. "Stay in your room? Lock the door." Panic dripped from her words, but her feet wouldn't budge. She felt suspended between the impulse to comfort her children and the urge to flee. Whatever was outside, it had come for them. The scratching intensified, nails scraping against wood in a grotesque symphony of dread. "No," she whispered, forcing the door half open, trying to peek through the sliver of light. Outside, a wall of darkness swallowed the yard, the moonlight unable to seep in. And then she saw it. A shape stood just beyond the threshold, tall and monstrous. It shifted, a hulking body covered in dark fur, eyes like burning coals reflecting her fear back at her. Drawing a shaky breath, she felt her resolve harden. This monster, this Dogman wasn't just folklore, it was real, a predator lurking, waiting for an opportunity. She needed to protect her kids, to fight, not just for their lives, but for the sanity of Pinewood Hollow. "Get away!" she screamed, mustering all the strength she could. But her voice trembled. Would such a plea even reach it? The howls intensified, the creature responding to her defiance, growling low and guttural. Panic clawed at her throat. She needed a weapon, anything to push it back. The kitchen. In a flash, Sarah turned and sprinted towards the kitchen. The shadows seemed to dance around her as she tore open drawers, frantically searching. Her fingers grazed a knife, the cold steel providing a shred of comfort. She gripped it tightly, her heart racing in a mix of fear and determination. Another howl erupted outside, a sound filled with fury and hunger. "Mommy!" her daughter cried, fear wrapping around the sound of her small voice like a suffocating blanket. "Stay inside," she shouted again as the creature slammed against the door, rattling the frame, sending shivers through her bones. With the Dogman at her door, Sarah realized it wasn't just her family at risk. This was a battle for the town, for everyone who had fallen victim to the things lurking in Pinewood Hollow. She steeled herself, heart thundering like a war drum, preparing for a confrontation that would either save or destroy her world. As she glanced back at the children, an awful thought settled in. What if the monster wanted more than just them? What if it was a harbinger, unleashing something far worse than she could imagine? She felt the weight of her choices loom above her like a dark cloud. It was time to see what the darkness had to offer. And as she steadied her breath, ready to face whatever emerged on the other side of that door, something in the back of her mind whispered another truth. What if the Dogman wasn't acting alone? The door shuddered violently against the frame, the Dogman-esque growl more a roar now, resounding like thunder in Sarah's chest. She clutched the knife tighter, knuckles white, as adrenaline surged through her veins. The creature was relentless, its claws threatening to splinter the wood. "Mom!" Her son's voice broke through her resolve, filled with raw fear. "Stay quiet, please," she begged, heart racing. She glanced at the clock, just minutes past midnight, the witching hour. She could almost hear the darkness creeping, wrapping around the house. The Dogman struck again, a forceful thud that made her lose her breath. She darted to her children's room, the steel of the knife glinting in the meager light. "Listen!" she whispered urgently. "I need you to be very quiet, all right?" She looked into their wide eyes, innocent, terrified. They nodded, but she could see the disbelief. The fear was real, and it was infectious. Another howl cut through the silence, eerie and chilling, like a ghost warning her. She returned to the door, peeking through the smallest crack. The vigil outside was menacing. The Dogman paced, its clawed feet tearing at the earth, sniffing, searching. "Mommy," her daughter whimpered. Sarah held up a finger, then turned her focus back to the door. What was this creature? It had to want something more than just them, more than a simple meal. Instinct screamed at her this was hunger, but it was also a hunt. This was a singular predator. It was part of something darker, something larger. Then she noticed the shadows. There were shapes around the edges of the yard, darker than the night, blending in. More creatures? Panic unfurled like storm clouds in her mind. What if they were preparing to storm the house? A faint rustle sounded against the front porch, and she thought she saw a movement, another figure creeping, drawn by the chaos. "No," she whispered. Even as she said it, she knew there was no backing down. What choice did she have? "Mom." Her son's apprehensive voice trembled. "Keep quiet," she urged again, clamping down a wave of dread. There was no point in trying to rationalize this, no time to process what was happening. She gestured for the kids to stay put, then bolted back to her kitchen. There had to be another way out, something, anything before the Dogman realized the kids were inside. She ransacked the drawers again, heart pounding in a race against time. As she tossed utensils aside, her eyes fell upon a heavy cast-iron frying pan. She grabbed it, the heft reassuring. This was going to be a fight. The Dogman was relentless, slamming against the door with a force that shook the house. Its growl deepened into a snarl, and Sarah braced herself. She could hear retreating footsteps from the direction of the front porch, other creatures, moving. Where were they? "Don't open the door, Mommy," her daughter cried, and the fear in her voice electrified the air. Sarah glanced back at the children, eyes wide. They were her lifeline. Suddenly, the door creaked open violently, flung wide by the Dogman that barged in. Shadows came tumbling behind it, an entire pack emerging, eyes like glowing infernos. Despair gripped her as sheer terror flooded the room. Sarah held the frying pan, with no illusions left. It wasn't just her kids, it was the whole town that these creatures craved. She had to protect her family and herself at any cost. The reality of her situation settled like lead in her stomach. She was facing something far more sinister than she could ever imagine. And just when she thought they were cornered, she caught a glimpse of light outside through the window. A flicker, small but breaking through the dark. But what could it mean? Would it be salvation, or would it signal a new nightmare? She had to decide quickly. What was waiting just beyond that flickering light? The air crackled with tension. With the pack of Dogmen filling the room, Sarah's heart raced. Time stretched like taffy, each second heavy with dread. The flickering light outside pulsed in rhythm with her racing pulse, soft yet insistent, as if beckoning her to make a choice. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice breaking, raising the frying pan like it was a shield against the encroaching darkness. The Dogman at the front, massive and imposing, stepped forward, its rotten breath washing over her like a chilling fog. Its eyes glowed, reflecting a primal hunger that twisted her stomach. "Mommy, please!" Her daughter's voice trembled. The fear in her children's eyes pierced deeper than any blade. "Get behind me!" Sarah shouted, mustering every ounce of courage. She didn't have a plan, just instinct and desperation. The shadows shifted, circling, pulling closer as if closing in for the kill. With a sudden movement, the lead Dogman lunged. Sarah swung the pan, connecting with a sickening thud against the creature's skull. It staggered back, its howl morphing into a howl of rage more than pain. Red droplets speckled the floor, but there was no time to relish the small victory. The other creatures were on her now, jumping and scratching, clawing at the walls as if they were trying to squeeze through the wood. More shadows slipped through the door, creating a cacophony of growls and snarls. She could feel the air grow heavy, suffocating. "Mom, we need to get out of here." Her son's voice rose with panic. "I know." What was that light? The flicker outside could be their only chance. But moving towards it meant abandoning the fragile safety of the kitchen. Would they face the pack or gamble on an uncertain escape? "On the count of 3, we run." She steadied her breath, eyes darting, weighing the risk. The shadows surged. It was now or never. 1, 2, a door creaked open just beyond her, plunging her into the malevolent chaos of the night outside. "Go!" she screamed, shoving her children toward the back door, praying they made it out before the monsters overwhelmed them. The children scrambled, but before Sarah could follow, a creature lunged, sharp teeth snapping inches from her face. Panic surged, and she swung the frying pan wildly, adrenaline coursing through her veins. It connected again, and the Dogman yelped, backing off with a swift growl. "Mom!" They were outside now, the light illuminating their path, but she hesitated, torn. Then a sharp bark split the air. Sarah turned to see a tall figure stepping into view, the flickering light revealing an outline of a man. He held a torch, its flame dancing defiantly against the encroaching darkness. "Over here," he called, urgency painting his voice. But the Dogmen regrouped, darting toward her, their snarls echoing like death knells. She hesitated, heart pounding, conflicted between safety and reunion. The man's eyes were wide, urging her on, but the shadows swarmed. "Mom, please!" Nothing felt safe. The man could be a savior or a trap. If she took a step toward him, was it salvation or another layer of danger? Sarah clenched the frying pan, knowing time was slipping away, every second louder than the next. "Run!" she shouted to her kids, hoping they would understand. They sprinted toward the man, but the Dogmen weren't far behind, lips curled, eyes glowing with hunger. Moments stretched to a breaking point as Sarah raced blindly, uncertain, clutching her weapon with white knuckles, battling the dark. What lay ahead? Could it be help or more horrors? The choice loomed like a shadow, and she had to face the unknown. The man's figure blurred as something leapt from the darkness, closer now than ever. The creature dove toward her, a flash of fur and teeth that made Sarah's blood run cold. She had a split second to react. "Mom!" Her son's voice shattered her daze, pulling her from the grip of terror. Time slowed. With a desperate lunge, she swung the frying pan again, striking the Dogman's shoulder. The force knocked it sideways, but it snarled, eyes dancing with malice. It was relentless, furious over the pain she caused. "Keep running!" The man yelled again, his torch casting an eerie glow that painted the night with flickers of hope and horror. Sarah's children were reaching him, the glow seeming to swallow them as they crossed into its radius. With no time for thought, she turned and dashed toward the doorway, aware of every scraping nail and hungry growl behind her. She burst through the back door, feeling a tidal wave of dread crashing in the night. Air was thick with something foul, and shadows danced at the edges of her vision. It was disorienting, the light flickering dangerously, threatening to extinguish with every gust of wind that rushed past. "Stay close," she shouted, adrenaline fueling her voice, pulling her kids to her side. The man with the torch rushed them into a narrow gap between two crumbling buildings, where the beams of light barely reached. The Dogmen were relentless, claws scratching against the door frame as they fought for entry, the sound piercing through the night like nails on a chalkboard. "What the hell are those things?" The man panted, urgency merging into the chaos around them. "Monsters!" her daughter cried, face buried against Sarah's jacket. "No, they're real." We can't stay here. The man flicked his gaze to the shadows, shifting nervously. Sarah could see the fear mirrored in his eyes, as tangible as her own. This was no trusted savior. This was a desperate stranger, lost just like them. The flickering light cast a chaotic dance around them, leaving the shadows hanging in the depths just out of sight. Here! The man pointed toward a rusty metal door embedded in the back wall. It looked like a maintenance entrance, half hidden by thick weeds. Quickly! She pushed her children forward, barely glancing back, the image of those ravenous jaws embedded in her mind. Panic clawed at her, urging her to move faster. As they scrambled to the door, the shadows pressed closer, drawn to their growing desperation. Sarah's heart thudded loud and heavy. The man reached for the handle, fingers trembling, then yanked it open just as a dark figure lunged. "Get inside." He shoved Sarah and the kids through the gap, flinging the door shut with a loud clang. They stumbled into darkness. It smelled moldy, damp like a tomb. Sarah pressed her body against the door, straining to listen. A low growl reverberated outside, punctuated by the frantic scratching of claws against metal. "Are we safe?" Her son's voice wobbled, thin and shaky, bouncing off the cold walls. Sarah's hands trembled. She wanted to say yes, but the certainty hum in her gut warned her otherwise. The man flicked his torch back on, illuminating a narrow space filled with pipes and old machinery, remnants of something long forgotten. "Just breathe," Sarah said, forcing calmness. But she could feel the dread building, a heavy fog wrapping around her mind. The man's gaze landed on her, wild and wide. "We need to move further inside. They'll find a way in." "They always do." She nodded, fighting the swell of panic. The kids clung to her, palpable fear radiating between them. As they stepped deeper into the cramped space, her heart raced not from the fear of what they escaped, but from the intuition that something worse awaited them. The light flickered once more, and then darkness fell in earnest. "Mom!" Her daughter whimpered. Sarah's skin prickled. Was someone else here? They weren't alone. A whisper of movement slithered through the air, the cold touch of unease creeping back in. "What is that?" The man whispered, inching backward, his torch illuminating a grotesque silhouette ahead, and as the beam hit its eyes, they glowed like embers ready to consume everything in their path. The question gnawed at her. As the shadows loomed once more, what had they truly escaped? The darkness wrapped around them like a suffocating blanket, pressing in, amplifying the whispers of dread. Sarah's breath quickened. The light from the man's torch wavered, flickering as if uncertain, casting long shadows that stretched and danced eerily against the damp walls. "Keep it steady," she urged, her voice low but firm, trying to reassure her quaking children, while her stomach churned with fear. The silhouette ahead shifted, morphing, as if it were alive, pulsating with a sinister hunger. "Is it one of them?" The man gasped, inching closer to Sarah. He was terrified, but she could see a flicker of determination beneath his wide eyes, the same determination that had driven him to help them. "Please no," her daughter pleaded, fingering the hem of Sarah's jacket. With a swift movement, the man directed the torch toward the shape. The light expanded, revealing not just one figure, but a whole mass of shadows gathered in the corners, writhing, moving softly like silk in the wind. It was an unsettling sight, enough to send chills racing down Sarah's spine. "What do we do?" The man hissed in desperation, backing up a step, the torch shaking in his grip. "Look for a way out," Sarah rasped. She clutched her children tightly, heart racing. The air felt thick, suffocating, alive with a tension that begged to be released. If those shadows were coming for them, they couldn't stay still. But the metallic stench of the damp room twisted her stomach. It felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. The man took a breath, raising his torch again. "There has to be something." Just the light caught a reflection, a glimmer of something sharp and jagged behind the mass of silhouettes. Another door? A window? Over there. Sarah pointed, adrenaline bolstering her courage. That. But before she could finish, the shadows surged forward, darting like smoke towards them. A chorus of low growls filled the space, rumbling through the air like ominous thunder. "Run!" she screamed, her instincts overtake her. They bolted around the machinery, the child's terrified cries melding into the chorus of panicked feet echoing against the walls. The man led them, torch flickering like a heartbeat, illuminating fleeting glimpses of what lay ahead, but the shadows weren't far behind. They erupted in snarling chaos, sharp claws clattering against metal, blurring the line between fear and survival. Sarah felt the heat of the creature's breath as it closed in. "Faster! Please!" Her son stumbled, but she seized his arm, forcing him onward. She could hear the man yelling, urging them forward against the tide of growing panic. Another turn. The room opened into a wider space, filled with more rusted machinery intertwining dangerously, almost like a maze, twisted and threatening. They skidded to a halt as the man turned, breathless. "There. That looks like," but the words ripped away as a furious roar echoed through the space, shaking them to their core. The shadows lunged again. "Go!" The man barked, pushing them onward, his bravery igniting Sarah's resolve. They dashed past a towering engine, the metallic odor like blood in the air. A glimmer of hope flickered before her, a small window, half broken, sunlight barely highlighting the path outside. Could they make it? As she veered towards it, a low growl emerged, more feral than the last. A shape, unmistakable, swung into view directly in front of them. "Mom!" Her children cried in unison, voices raw with fear. She was torn, their lives hanging in the balance, a choice between fighting or fleeing, between the unknown horrors of darkness or the threat that loomed closer. The Dogman emerged, its eyes glinting like hollow lanterns, teeth stained with the residue of past horrors. And in that moment, as she faced the terrifying beast, Sarah knew they had entered a deeper darkness. An abominable choice lay before them, one that would decide more than just their survival. Would they confront their greatest fears, or plunge deeper into the night? Time froze as the creature lunged, and in an instant, the air filled with a piercing scream. What had truly been awakened in the dark? The world melted into chaos. Sarah's mind raced as the Dogman lunged, its jaws snapping just inches from her face. A primal instinct surged within her, urging her to flee. Everything else faded, the remnants of the dark maze, the roar of shadows, and the quaking whispers of dread. "Move!" she shouted, yanking her children toward the nearby wall, hoping the thick machinery could offer some cover. But as she glanced back, the Dogman had reoriented, its eyes locking onto Sarah with a hunger that sent icy claws scraping down her spine. "Mom, please!" her son whimpered, dragging his feet. There was no time to hesitate. They were out of options. The man with the torch charged forward, torch blazing, creating a momentary barrier of light against the dark creature. "Head for the window," he yelled. "Now!" With a nod from Sarah, they pivoted. Fear clawed at every step as the shadows seemed to howl, echoing their terror. The Dogman snarled, an ear-splitting sound that rattled the very air. "Keep running." The man swung the torch low, its beam illuminating jagged metal and twisted remnants from another time. They barreled past rusted gears and thick cables wrapped like snakes. The window was still a few paces away, but every second felt like an eternity under the creature's fierce gaze. "Almost there," Sarah urged, her heart hammering against her chest, loud enough to drown out the growls. The Dogman lunged again, a flash of fur and razor-sharp teeth. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her, her foot catching on an exposed pipe. She tumbled, pulling her children down with her. "No!" she cried, pain shooting through her ankle. Get up! Get up! The man's voice was frantic, and the shadows surged as Sarah scrambled to her feet, breathless and filled with dread. They pushed on, one last sprint toward the window. A flick of hope ignited. If they could just reach it, the sun was brighter there, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness that chased them. Their hands stretched out, fingertips brushing the jagged glass. Sarah's breath quickened. The light was just beyond. Mom! Her daughter's voice pulled her back from despair. The shadows exploded forward, a whirlwind of terror that darkened the room, the Dogman leading the charge. Sarah squeezed her children's hands, and for a fleeting moment, she felt the unity of their fear, the strength that came from holding on tight. Jump! The man shouted, and without thinking, Sarah propelled her children through the shattered opening, shoving them toward safety. Freedom was within reach. She could feel the warmth of sunlight as it enveloped them, the air outside fresh like a promise. But as she turned to escape herself, the Dogman was upon her, a blur of clawed fury and unforgiving force. Sarah fell backward into the light, a scream escaping her throat. As she tumbled through the window, the beast's haunting roar echoed in her ears, drowning out all else. The world spun, and blurred light and dark intertwined. Then silence. The thud of her body hitting ground was jarring, but the suffocating silence around her was worse. She lay on the grass, breathless, catching glimpses of her children beside her, wide-eyed and terrified. She struggled to gather herself, every nerve alive with anticipation. "Where is he?" Sarah gasped, panic flooding her voice. The sun poured down, but a shadow lingered in her mind. Darkness had burst through once more. As she composed herself, the wind shifted. A faint whisper danced through the air, chilling and familiar. It slithered past her ears, a warning. "Mom!" Her daughter whimpered, pointing behind, and there it was, lurking just beyond the broken glass, a twisted silhouette framed by fading daylight. The Dogman lingered, eyes glinting like shards in a dark sea, waiting, watching. The chase had only just begun. What new horrors awaited them now that they had crossed the threshold? The air outside felt wrong. It was too quiet, too still. Sarah's heart raced as her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the man who had helped them. "Where did he go?" she whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. Her children huddled close, their faces pale and streaked with terror. Shadows stretched across the grass as dusk approached, swallowing the warmth of the day. "Mom, I don't like this." Her son clutched her tightly, his breath ragged. "I know, baby," Sarah said, voice trembling. The adrenaline that had propelled her moments before began to wane, leaving behind an overwhelming dread that seeped into her bones. She looked back at the shattered window, its jagged edges like teeth ready to bite. The Dogman was still there. It stood just beyond the glass, unmoving. But its eyes, they glimmered with a hunger that felt like it reached right into her soul. A low growl crept from its throat, a chilling promise that echoed in the quiet. Sarah forced herself to step forward, feeling the uneven earth beneath her. "We need to go," she said, trying to sound strong, but her voice cracked. Suddenly, a rustling behind her snapped her attention. A dark figure emerged from the trees, weaving through the underbrush like a shadow detached from its source. It was the man with the torch. "Run!" he shouted, panic etched across his face as he barreled toward them. "Where is the Dogman?" Sarah demanded, already knowing the answer. "There is no time. Just move," he yelled, glancing back, eyes wide with fear. They bolted, hearts thundering like drums. The trees around them loomed tall and gnarled, branches clawing at the fading light. Sarah felt a heavy weight settle in her stomach as her instincts screamed that safety was still far, far away. They plunged deeper into the woods, the underbrush slapping against their legs. The man's torch flickered and sputtered, struggling to ward off the dark encroaching around them. The shadows thickened, morphing into fingers that reached out, desperate to grab hold. "Stay close," Sarah barked, her voice sharp like a knife. She turned sharply, feeling those predatory eyes watching from the depths. Panic surged within her like a tidal wave. "Mom, what if it finds us?" her daughter cried, dragging her feet. "It won't," Sarah reassured, but the words fell flat. She felt more hollow than ever, every step drawing them closer to the unknown. A sudden crash sounded behind them. The man with the torch stopped short, his breath ragged. "Go!" he shouted again, but it was too late. A howl split the night, a horrific sound that made their bones rattle. The Dogman burst from the trees, its silhouette massive against the pale moonlight, ripping through the shadows like a blade. "Run!" the man screamed, throwing the torch into the air. It arced, spiraling toward the ground, a brief beacon of light before it extinguished, plunging them into darkness. Sarah's breath quickened as she grabbed her children, pulling them forward. Her ears rang with fear, drowning out the growls and the snapping of twigs beneath heavy paws. They raced through the thickening fog, cutting through the oppressive silence that felt alive with lurking horrors. "Where do we go?" her son cried, as they stumbled over roots and debris. "Anywhere but here." The desperation in her voice surprised even herself as they plunged deeper into foliage, branches whipping against their faces. Behind them, the growling intensified. It echoed like thunder, vibrating the ground beneath her feet. She could feel the heat of the Dogman's breath at their backs, hot and hungry. "Mom!" her daughter screamed as she fell, tripping over a hidden root. "No!" Sarah turned, but time had run out. The night swallowed them whole, and the world seemed to close in, leaving only the horrific sounds of pursuit. With her heart in her throat, she clutched her son's hand tighter, racing back to her daughter. But when she turned, there was nothing there. The silence pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. Where is she?" A shadow flickered in the corner of her eye, and dread licked at Sarah's resolve, stealing her breath. Was the horror finally catching up? The Dogman had found them. "Mom!" A faint cry rang through the darkness. Her heart dropped. Did Sarah have the strength to face the horror that awaited? To find her child before it was too late? The chase hadn't ended, it had merely begun anew. "Stay right here," Sarah hissed to her son, her heart racing as she scanned the blackness that now enveloped them. She could barely see the outline of the trees, twisted and gnarled, looming like specters in the night. "Mom!" His voice trembled, high-pitched, fear slicing through the quiet. "Shoo!" she whispered, lowering herself to the ground, ears straining for any sign of movement. The weight of dread settled like a rock in her gut. Her mind battled between the desire to flee and the need to stay close to her children. Suddenly, a chilling howl pierced the air, closer now, echoing off the trees. It was a sound that crawled under her skin, igniting every instinct to run. The Dogman was hunting. She felt the pull of panic tightly gripping her throat. "Ben, we have to find your sister," she urged, keeping her voice low. "We have to hurry." He nodded, his wide eyes glistening in the slim light that fought to break through the oppressive darkness. They pulled themselves forward, heartbeats pounding in unison as they crept through the underbrush. "Mom," Ben stuttered. "What if it gets us?" "We need to be brave," she said, forcing conviction into her voice, though her heart shattered at the truth of her own words. As they inched deeper into the woods, her mind raced. Where could Lily be? "Lily," she called softly, keeping the fear out of her tone. She took a single step forward, scanning the emptiness. "Lily, answer me." Silence swallowed the forest. Amid the silence, dread coiled tighter around her chest. They couldn't linger. Time was slipping away. The Dogman echoed in her mind, a creature who thrived in chaos and fear. Maybe she went back to the house? Ben suggested, his voice frail as he tugged at the hem of her jacket. "No!" "We're not going back there," she snapped, her heart sinking at the thought. But the deeper they went, the more her skin prickled with anxiety. The woods were alive with whispers, crackling breaths just out of view. Twigs snapped. Was it a creature? Or was it the wind? She couldn't tell anymore. Every shadow felt like an entity lurking just beyond her line of sight. "Please, be quiet," Sarah whispered urgently, tugging him closer as they stumbled through the underbrush. The shadows thickened around them like a living thing, pulse quickening with each rustle and rustling leaf. Then came another howl, a desperate sound that made the air around them vibrate, colder than the frigid night air. Sarah's heart seized. That howl was different. It seemed to call for something. And then she saw it, a flicker of movement through the trees, a fleeting glimpse of brown fur and sharp teeth. "Run!" she commanded, and they took off again, branches snapping underfoot, heartbeats pounding, terror surging through her veins. She didn't dare look back. "Mom, slow down." Ben gasped, the sound of his voice merely a distant echo in her ears, as fear propelled her forward. "Keep up," she yelled, desperation sharp in her throat. The Dogman-esque growl erupted closer, more menacing now, cutting through the night as sharp as a knife, a guttural sound vibrating beneath their skin. Suddenly, Ben stumbled, tripping over a root as he cried out, "I can't get up!" But as she turned to grab him, her breath caught. A second howl rang through the trees, echoing like a death knell. Then, a flicker of movement caught her eye, a dark shape, impossibly close, emerging from the underbrush. "Mom!" Ben's voice was small, terrified. Before she could react, a flash of teeth gleamed in the darkness, and the Dogman lunged. "Run!" Sarah screamed, her instincts screaming at her to move as adrenaline surged through her body. But the terror was blinding. She froze for a heartbeat, clutching her son tightly, as the beast's breath brushed against her skin, hot and rancid. With a burst of raw instinct, Sarah tore her gaze from the creature and ran, tugging Ben along as branches sliced across their skin, feeling the weight of the night closing in, suffocating. "Lily! Where are you?" Each cry bore their fear, each echo returned without answer. The forest wrapped around them, darkening, pressing in as the Dogman-esque growl vibrated in the air. And then she saw it, a glimmer of light in the distance, a beacon pulling her toward it, but was it hope? Or a trap? Just ahead, a clearing appeared, and with it, the promise of escape. But she could feel the malevolence of the night pressing against her, clawing like the creature behind them. Would they make it to safety? Or would they fall victim to the darkness lurking, waiting? The chase had just begun, but the end felt closer with every step. What awaited them in the clearing? "Mom, I can't," Ben panted, his voice quaking with exhaustion. And with that, Sarah realized she couldn't just run, she needed a plan. But in the darkness, time was running out. Would it be enough? The panic nearly swallowed Sarah whole. Her heart raced like a runaway train as she spotted the clearing illuminated by the pale moonlight, a promise yet felt so distant. She released a shaky breath, pulling Ben closer. "We can make it," she urged, though every word felt heavy with doubt. "Please, hurry!" Ben gasped, glancing back over his shoulder. The low growl of the Dogman cut through the air, a reminder of the predator hot on their heels. Shadows danced behind them, swirling with hunger, echoing madness. "Think, Sarah, think!" She gripped Ben's hand tighter. With every thump of her heart, the weight of her decision loomed. They needed a refuge, somewhere to shield them from the relentless night. Maybe the clearing held more than just an escape. Perhaps there was hope. As they plunged into the clearing, Sarah's breath snagged in her throat. Up ahead lay an old, deteriorating barn, its wooden structure barely holding together, twisted and worn, yet standing defiantly against the encroaching darkness. "There!" she pointed, adrenaline surging. "It's our chance." Terror fueled their flight as they reached the barn door battered by years of neglect. With a frantic shove, Sarah threw it open just wide enough for them to slip inside. The smell of damp hay mingled with decay, a stench both repulsive and familiar. "Keep quiet," she whispered, glancing outside as shadows flitted closer, drawn by the scent of fear. Inside, the barn felt alive, creaking and moaning in the wind. Suddenly, the door shook violently, claws raking against the wood. The Dogman growled, a sound that made every nerve in Sarah's body scream for safety. "What do we do?" Ben whimpered, his tiny body shaking next to her. "Hang on," she urged, scanning their surroundings. In the far corner stood stacks of old tools, and beyond that, a trap door barely visible against the dirt floor tiles. "We should hide down there." "Mom, there's something in there," Ben protested, his voice cracking as he pointed toward the darkened corners, shadows shifting eerily like malevolent spirits teasing them. "I know, but it's better than out here." Desperation clawed at her resolve. With a nod, she led Ben toward the trap door, each step heavier than the last, but they had no option now. The door creaked open, revealing a dark descending staircase. "Go, go!" she urged, pushing him ahead. They huddled close, the chill seeping into their bones as they stepped into the darkness. She closed the door behind them, blocking out the looming horror, but her heart was heavy with dread. As they crept down the steps, her mind raced. Was Lily down here? Images of the Dogman shrieked in her head, its glowing eyes cold and hungry. The air felt thick, alive with an unsettling energy, whispering uncertainty. "Lily," she called quietly, anxiety pulsing through each syllable. The only answer was the eerie silence echoing back at them. "Mom, I can't stay in the dark." Ben's voice quivered, small and fragile, sending her resolve crumbling. "Shush," she whispered, brushing aside her own fears to comfort him. "We're safe for now. Just listen." Suddenly, a cry split the atmosphere, a heart-wrenching sound, strung with panic. It was Lily. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Keep close," she hissed, heart hammering. They bolted toward the sound, deeper into the moonlit shadows. "Lily." She strained to listen. The sound came from a tiny room at the end of the corridor. Desperation clawed at her chest as she pushed through, the foul smell thickening, terror mingling with hope. Through the cracked opening, she found Lily huddled, wide-eyed and frightened. Relief washed over her like a tidal wave. "Sweetheart." Sarah rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter, the warmth and comfort flooding back into life. "Mom," she cried, clinging tightly. "I thought you'd never find me." "I'm here now," Sarah whispered, tears threatening to spill over. "We need to go now." And they turned to flee. But in that moment, the barn began to tremble. The heavy footsteps of the Dogman resounded, echoing through the earth like rolling thunder. "We've got to hurry." The urgency surged through her voice, slashing through the fear wrapping around them. "Follow me." They raced back through the chambers, weaving through shadows, the sounds of pursuit alive and smothering. But outside, the dawn was breaking, the golden light cracking open the darkness, a thin line of safety pulling her onward. Then a snarl ripped through the air. The Dogman surged forth, but halted as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the entrance. Its howls were furious yet strangled, caught between the shadows it called home and the fierce light that threatened to consume it. "Now!" Sarah urged, and they barreled forward, scrambling for the light. One last leap into the embrace of dawn, and freedom flooded over them, a healing balm washing away the darkness. They tumbled into the open grass of the clearing, hearts pounding but alive. But the monster would return. The fear lingered thick in the air, an unshakable reminder that while they had escaped, the saga of Pinewood Hollow was far from over. They stood together, emerging from their night terrors into the dawn light, hands clasped tight, faces smudged yet glowing with hope. Sarah drew them close, her children, her lifeline. "I won't let it take you," she vowed fiercely, holding tightly onto their fragile moments together. And with the dawn illuminating their path, they turned back towards Pinewood Hollow, ready to face whatever came next. Together. As the sun rose, Sarah felt a new determination swell in her chest. She knew they would fight united, unyielding. But war wasn't won by just surviving. It was a call to arms. The Dogman had found them, but it had awakened something stronger. A need and urgency to confront the darkness, to face not only the monster lurking outside but to unveil the secrets hidden beneath the surface of Pinewood Hollow. This was just the beginning, a call to spread their story, to awaken others. They would not stand alone. Sarah turned to her children, resolute. "Let us go home," she declared, ready to spotlight the darkness ahead. And as they stepped forward, she felt something powerful surge through her, a light seated in hope, love, and determination. Together, they faced what awaited, hand in hand. And this time, they would not back down. As you read this final tale of courage and resolve, remember, you need to subscribe now to be with us on the next adventure. Don't miss our exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed that algorithm, and let me know you're with us. Flood the comments section with your thoughts because I want to hear every one of your reactions and theories. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Stand with us as we embrace the darkness and seek the light together.